Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So I know it's gonna be kind of a weird intro for today's video, but you know how I do a lot of Genshin fan art and I just like playing Genshin in general, and here's some evidence. I just booted up the game to show you guys, but I also play a lot of Ensemble stars, and I was thinking that potentially I could kind of merge both of my interests of Genshin and Ensemble Stars into one. And I remember saying last week that if you watch the bonus video where I did the time lapse for, I guess, like the Sumeru boys aggravate and kind of like their Genshin idol AU kind of thing, I thought it'd be fun to do maybe them in the Ensemble Stars style. So I think that's what we're going to be doing today. I know today's footage is going to be very scattered and very weird, so I apologize about that. You guys can let me know if you prefer seeing kind of the tablet screen version or do you prefer seeing the screen recording version, because I'm actually only going to be doing 2 people today. So even though I'm showing you guys thumbnails of all 4 of the Aggravate members, which is, if you're not familiar, so in Genshin, I decided to pick Kaveh, Alhaitham, Cyno and Tighnari to become one little idol group, and because of their reactions and the kind of setup of their elemental visions and stuff, they become aggravate because they're electro and dendro. So I thought it'd be fun to take them and put them into the Ensemble Stars style. So I'm showing you guys what the cards generically look like, and if you're not familiar, I'll make sure to put some examples on the screen of what I'm going to be doing. So basically in Ensemble Stars, you're playing as like a manager for idol groups, and for Ensemble Stars music, the different things that you can summon are basically cards of characters, and a lot of the characters have different like event cards and all that jazz. But more specifically, I believe it's the 4-star cards and the 5-star cards. So those are kind of like the rarities for the gacha, and they have basically 2 versions, I believe. So they have their normal card or the unbloomed version, and then when you upgrade and you're able to bloom your card transforms to a different illustration. Now for Ensemble Stars, the illustrations are actually like full-blown splash art kind of styled illustrations, but I'm gonna keep the compositions to be within the borders of the cards, just because I'm not going to be doing a full-blown background and pose and stuff, because it'll take me a lot longer and I'm not up for that challenge at the moment. So I'm going to stay within kind of this entire card kind of border for the most part. I'll make sure to link below where I found the tweet that had a person who made the template for the card. I'm not going to go and change the color of the stars, so both the cards that I'm going to be doing today, which are going to be of Kaveh and Alhaitham, I'm going to keep them as the yellow cards rather than like changing their different, like if they're blue, green, or red, or whatever other color there is. So I'm just going to leave it as that, and I'm going to try my best to match the aesthetic and the style of Ensemble Stars music's artwork. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with their artwork, but they have a good mixture of having like a simple style but making it very eye-catching. So the lines pretty much like don't have too much line variation. It has quite thin lines, very consistent width, and like the color of the lines pretty much don't really change all that much, other than like the eyes where they have a little bit more of tinted brown or red to kind of make it a little bit softer. But then after doing the line work, which you're seeing me do, I went to do the coloring, and I was kind of struggling, especially for Kaveh, figuring out how to mimic the coloring style. So I feel like the skin was pretty straightforward. It has a good mixture of both soft shading and cell shading in a sense, and I think everything else, like the hair and the clothing, also follow that same format. But for me, it was hard for me to kind of determine where to put shadows and how they do certain clothing aspects. And I think this is just like an issue that I personally struggle with, is that I think I don't give a good sense of 3D-dimensionality to a piece via line work super clearly. and I feel like Ensemble Stars does a super great job at that, and it's able to convey that both in the line but like also with its shading in a sense, because their shading is kind of quite minimal. Like I said, it's mostly cell shaded, and there's some areas where it's airbrushed, but like certain edges are also blurred and softened to be a little bit more softer to create more of a different aesthetic. So I did struggle with that. I tried my best to do it, but for the most part, Kaveh was kind of like my guinea pig because I started with him first. And you can see that in the corner where I guess like right now it's Tsukasa in the little window. I have my PureRef open, which is kind of like a place you can compile your references, and I like to use it because it's a kind of like a floating window. So I made sure to have the background transparent, and so that I can kind of like compile all my images, and then I can kind of like pan through as a separate application rather than opening a bajillion windows in Clip Studio Paint and having them floating, because usually I work in Paint Tool SAI, and the version 1, from my knowledge, you can't exactly have floating windows, so that's kind of like my workaround. But Clip Studio Paint does have the option to pop out your windows. If you go into window, I believe canvas, new canvas, or not new canvas, new view or something like that, you can pull out your view and just like make it a separate window and it'll float. So it's very nice, but I still like to have like all my images compiled and saved onto PureRef boards so that I can just quickly pan through, because I needed a heck of a lot of references for all 4 artworks that I'm going to be doing today. So like I mentioned, I'm only going to be doing 2 members for today, so if you want me to do Cyno and Tighnari, please let me know and I'll make sure to record the process. Otherwise, I'll just treat it as like something I can do for fun at some other point throughout this month, because the process for this took a lot longer than expected. I think it's mostly because I was doing a lot of like testing and playing around with mostly Kavehs. So you can see I was I was struggling with the shading and the lighting for Kavehs, and I feel like this one's actually not too bad. I do think he kind of looks like Nazuna a little bit. I believe his name is Nazuna. I think it's like he's not the leader, he's the eldest, I think, in the rabbits unit, but he kind of looks like him because I feel like I gave him a little bit more of a baby face. Okay, so for the text, I didn't want to have too many like inconsistencies, and because they don't really have like last names that are very apparent, I just decided to put Aggravate as like their unit name on the bottom in the blue bar, and then I'll have their full, just their, I guess their first name or whatever on the top, so that it can have more of a consistent look among all the members, just in case if I want to match them all anyways. So from my knowledge, I think the capital letter of the name matches whatever kind of colored card it is, but like I said, I'm not going to be changing the color of the card just because it was a bit of a hassle to need to manually fix the template, so I didn't really want to do that. So both Kaveh and Alhaitham, and in the future if I do Cyno and Tighnari, all their cards will be part of like the yellow cards, if that makes sense. So hopefully, actually, maybe I should have prefaced this video way in the beginning. I feel like I'm appealing to a very niche part of my brain, but also just like a niche part of people in general, because if you don't play Genshin, this might not be relatable to you, but if you don't play Ensemble Stars, it might also not be relatable to you. But if you don't play mobile games, I'm like alienating some people, and I apologize. But you know, it's kind of just fun to mess around and play with some art styles if you're ever interested. I do recommend that if you don't play either Genshin or even Ensemble Stars, check out their splash art though. I think it's quite interesting how different of an approach they have for their art styles, because Genshin feels a little bit more painterly and a little bit more fleshed out in a certain way, which feels a little bit more, I don't know, it feels softer in a sense, but it has like a lot of detailing and more brushstrokes that feel more apparent. But for Ensemble Stars, it's very clean, like super clean, very easy to read, but also very flashy, if that makes sense. And one thing I really like about their art in general, or just like composition and stuff, which I find very interesting, is that their sense of composition with posing is just really well done. I love looking at the cards because a lot of them have like foreshortening or just like a good play with the composition on how they have placed the character inside of the card borders. But even though it's technically like a full rectangular artwork, if that makes sense, I just love looking at the artwork, and I think that's what drawn me into wanting to even play Ensemble Stars, is that the artwork for just the characters I think are super pretty, and the coloring and everything is just very captivating to me. So I wanted to kind of give it a go and, you know, take a stab at see what I can learn from kind of like mimicking a little bit of the style. And I'm just having like small realizations, like the reasons why I potentially don't like line work, or like maybe I just don't spend enough time doing the line work, which is maybe contributing to why I don't like it as much. So I didn't really talk about I guess like the first portion of the card for Kaveh. So in the first one, I decided to go with more like, or at least this is kind of like an observation that I had, the unbloomed cards tend to have more of a, I don't know, like not a stage usually kind of setting for the cards. I know there's some exceptions, especially like the beginning kind of cards you can select. I think for like Hito's card, he's kind of on a stage, and then when you bloom it, it's still like the stage, but it's kind of like a different color combinations. Oh, okay, let me talk about this first. Like I said, the whole entirety of this video's format is just gonna be really weird because I have screen recorded footage. I also have the time lapses from Clip Studio Paint, and then I have some where I'm drawing like physically with the tablet and stuff. So I'm gonna stick to one format another time. So this is just kind of me just testing things out and seeing if I do like the pace of the time lapses from Clip Studio Paint or not. But yeah, here's the unbloomed one, and then here's me working on the bloom version. The bloom version, I kind of wish I worked a little bit harder on the background because it's a little weird, and I don't know if I like the lighting of Kaveh in this one. I definitely think the unbloomed version is a little bit stronger. So for the unbloomed version, I actually did want to put him into a tracksuit or some kind of training gear because I think all the idols in Ensemble Stars has them. So I decided to do that, and then to kind of carry over, I decided to do the idol outfit that I kind of designed for the previous time lapses that you guys saw from last week. So for the majority of the next drawings, which is of Alhaitham, I'm going to do mostly the time-lapse version until we get to the line work of the bloomed version. And that one will be me. You'll actually like see my hand working on the tablet, but please bear with me when I start to show you guys mostly time-lapse versions, just because I was running out of space on my computer, even though I moved a bunch of files and stuff, just because I had like I think 4 different videos going on at the same time, and my computer just doesn't have the capacity. I even moved footage to like other memory sticks and stuff, just in case if I just wanted to move stuff off, so I have enough room to film for this video, because I did end up doing 4 different artworks for this, and then 4 smaller artwork at the very end, which you'll see a little bit later. So for Alhaitham's, actually for all of them, I did do the thumbnailing and just planning for like generic planning and stuff on my iPad, and then I exported my thumbnails to Clip Studio Paint. I enlarged my thumbnails, and then I did kind of like a rough sketch. I did the line work, and then we can do the color. Now for Alhaitham, I decided to go with him reading a book, and he has his headphones in, just to kind of tie in with Kaveh's a little bit, since I want them to match a little bit, since I know people tend to pair them up, and then I'll try to see if I can get Cyno and Tighnari's kind of matching a little bit. So yeah, here's Alhaitham, and then working on the bloomed version. So I didn't go too drastic with the kind of composition of his pose. I think it's also because I changed the direction of his hand. I was gonna have it so that he's kind of, I think, touching his earpiece in a certain way so that his arm will be raised more, but instead I moved it so that he's touching the mic, which I didn't really mind. I know this one actually I worked a lot quicker on, and here's some footage of me actually doing the line work so you guys can physically see it, and you can kind of see the setup of my screen. So I have a second view of Alhaitham. So while I'm sketching, I have the flipped version so that I can see if anything looks wonky, but while I'm doing the line work, I have just a smaller like overview so that I can make sure things look correct. Below that, I have my peer ref, which you can see I was using mostly Rei, like Sakuma Rei, and then I was using Koga, and I think at some point I'm going to use some other people from Ensemble stars as references, because it was hard for me to mimic the style in a way, because there's a lot of things and rules I feel like whoever illustrates for Ensemble Stars music follows, which I feel like I still don't quite understand. So I wanted to make sure I'm cross-referencing from a bunch of different images so that I can kind of compile them up into, you know, something that might be a little bit more accurate for what I'm looking for. So for Alhaitham's outfit, let's see. I guess for all of them, I kind of had more of like a mesh theme going on. Oh, I didn't realize I didn't show the skin coloring portion, but yeah, I decided to do the flats and stuff and do the skin, and I decided to do a different lighting because I believe for both of Kaveh's and Alhaitham's, they had very similar lighting on the face, which I was getting really sick of doing because it looks very generic and a little bit weird for this kind of setting. So I decided to go with a little bit more shadow and just more of a direct highlight on the side of where I think the lighting would be. After that, I did the eyes, and then I readjusted the highlight for the nose just because his nose seemed a little bit short just from how I was kind of putting in the highlight. I think the angle just makes his face look a little bit more like squirt, looks a little bit more shorter than usual. Added in a little bit of beads of sweat before adding into the hair color. Now, in general, I made Alhaitham's hair a little bit more greeny instead of just like pure gray, just because a lot of the grays that I was choosing I just didn't really like, and the one that I liked the most just had a little bit more green to it. So apologies if it's not like entirely accurate. And I think this one I like the most in terms of all of the illustrations that I did today, other than the last 4 that you're gonna see. And then here I have it kind of like an overview so that you guys don't have me just panning throughout the whole canvas of everything. So for the line work, kept everything quite clean. There's a few things that I did change, and some things I added a little bit more of like thickness to some of the objects, but for the most part the line work went pretty quickly. And then after that I did a quick background, and then I worked on doing the skin first, then the eyes, then the hair, and then once I'm finished with the hair I'll add in the clothing, and then we can do final adjustments to everything. So you can see I was trying to fix up a lot of things, and I have probably too many layers when working on this, but I think this one turned out the best probably out of the other ones. Composition wise, I think it's a little bit weak, but I do like the coloring and the approach a lot better than some of the other attempts. Because even this one feels a little bit, I don't know, a little wonky. I think it's also the shading of the skin is a little bit too warm maybe, and not intense in some parts. Maybe that's why I don't really favor it as much. But hopefully it's not too bad to watch through all this footage for you guys. And I think at some point, I think maybe it was during Alhaitham's that I kind of figured out how I wanted to do some of the clothing folds and how they did like gradations and like picked edges to make a little bit softer versus like completely cell shaded. So that's why I feel like I like this one the most. And I think this color wise, I like it the most too. Not too much to talk about until we get to the last portion, which I mentioned that I have 4 kind of smaller illustrations, but you guys will see, just because I thought it would be an easier way for me to incorporate both Cyno and Tighnari somehow in this video. So here's Alhaitham bloomed version and the unbloomed version earlier. So yeah, here's the cards, and for Cyno and Tighnari, I will find a way to include them. So I have the reference of my Kaveh illustration on the left, and you can see I have a chibi of Hiro on the right. So I was switching between Hiro and Koga so that I could do the chibi versions. I also have Hokuto there too, but the chibi versions of when they're doing stuff in their, I guess it's called work. So it's kind of like their, is it like the training studio? I'm not too sure what it's called. I'll put up a clip of it so you guys have a little bit of context. But when you have the members in this kind of like little room setting, they have these little chibi forms that you can actually change their outfits and stuff, and they go to do work and stuff depending on how many tickets you have, and they can basically earn you rewards. They can use for like, I don't know, like ascending your cards and stuff. So I wanted to do basically different versions or not different versions. I wanted to do one version for each of the members so that I could do at least like a group little picture of them together, because I think it would be cute to have them as like one full unit, just because I was not able to draw Cyno or Tighnari today. So hopefully that's not too bad of an idea and you guys don't mind that I only have a little bit of footage for this one of Kaveh, and then the rest of them are once again time-lapsed because I have terrible planning and this took way longer than I wanted it to, considering I gave myself like, I think a week or two. No, a week and a half, I think, to work on this, and I only ended up doing 4 illustrations, which I feel bad about. But yeah, let me know if you guys do want to see me do Cyno and Tighnari though, because I'll definitely do it. And if you guys like the kind of like mini series I have for them, I will definitely do maybe Swirl in the Ensemble Star style maybe. So for coloring, it's actually pretty simple. It's mostly just flats, and there's like minimal shading for the skin. I don't really notice too much shading at all for the clothing, but for the hair, there is a subtle gradient, usually darker at the bottom and lighter at the top. And then we have little dots for highlights, and that's pretty much it. I did have to look at 2 other, I think, people in Ensemble Star. So I think it's Kaoru and I don't know his name. Is it Hibiki? It's like Wataru? Maybe one of them. Basically, they have longer hair, so I wanted to make sure that I knew how to draw the hair for Cyno, for Kaveh, and for Tighnari, so that I'm not accidentally adding too much shadow for them, because I was not sure if any of them had extra shadow or if it's just like all flats. And then Kaveh also has like a little bit of gradation in like little hair parts where it's kind of more brown, so I wanted to add that in too. So here's kind of like the overview of the process for Kaveh. So you can see I did kind of like a base. I did trace over the base so that we can match the style much easier this way. But then for, you know, other illustrations, I'm just trying to mimic the style to the best of my ability. But for this one, because I wanted to match basically 1-to-1, I tried my best just to, you know, copy it first and then draw on top so we can make sure that they resemble how they're supposed to look like in this kind of form. One thing I can say for sure is that I did not make the line thickness as thick as it should have been. I believe there's like 2 thicknesses for the chibis. It's almost like slightly thicker and a slightly thinner one for like inside details, and then the slightly thicker one is kind of for like the outside lines and some of the more larger objects and stuff, or just things that have less detailed. Yeah. And I think other than that, I don't think I described this at all when I was working on, what is it called? The other artworks, is that once I finished the artwork for any of them, I would actually duplicate the artwork and then I would merge it or like flatten it. And then I would take it and Gaussian blur it so that I could basically make it a little bit more hazy to give it that more animation cell effect, or like looks like the image is deteriorating a little bit. I believe I saw it on a Drawfee episode where they did that and it looked really cool, and I do like the effect of it because it kind of makes things look a little bit less sharp and a little bit more hazy and kind of, I don't know. I think it just fits a little bit better than rather having things look too clean and sharp. I'm not sure if it's too noticeable from what you guys were seeing, but I could definitely see the difference when I was working. But yeah, there was Cyno, and then now we're working on Tighnari. I kind of made up their outfits on the fly, which I kind of realized I didn't match Kaveh's to how I drew it like previously in a different illustration, so apologies about that. But for everything else, I kind of just made up because I don't think I actually have any full body designs for any of them. But yeah. I think that's about it. I think at some point Cyno's skin tone was the wrong color, and then Tighnari, I almost forgot his tail. And here's our little aggravate squad. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's video. I know it's like a weird like mishmash of footage, but I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye!